It's that time of year again. Everyone knows that the holidays can become overwhelming quickly, so the sooner you get things done, the better. For both shoppers and businesses, the best time to score great deals during the holidays is Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names to entrepreneurs who are participating in their first Black Friday, Cyber Monday this year. This Black Friday, join thousands of new entrepreneurs hearing for the first time with Shopify. Sign up for your free trial today at shopify.com/promo. That's shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo and make this Black Friday one to remember.
What did Chris Mason have to say about it?
He's the BBC correspondent.
He flipping is.
Yeah.
Do you want to see what he said about it?
Yes.
It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
The politics of this, where does this leave her, do you think?
So two things. I mean, firstly, it was clear that the Chancellor was absolutely boiling, apoplectic about being scooped on her own budget by the publication of that Office for Budget Responsibility document before she had the chance to stand up. In terms of what she said...
Chris, I'm going to have to interrupt you.
We've actually got Chris in the studio now to finish that sentence, and we're going to... No, sorry, we don't have time. Sorry, Chris. We'll have to come to you next week.
Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the weekend pedalo to our midweek Caribbean cruise. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny.
What have you been up to, Kenny? In what ingenious ways have you been avoiding cheese this week?
Do you know what? I didn't avoid cheese. I was at a food fair on Wednesday. I'm really lucky. The country's best farm shop, according to this year's awards, is literally a 20-minute stroll down the road, down in Topsham. And they had a festive blowout midweek. My other half said we had to go to. And the idea of going to a shop on a Wednesday night ain't my bag of stuff, I can tell you. So I shuffled along with a grumpy face. And as a result, on Wednesday, I've now ordered guinea fowl for Christmas Day. And they've got Wagyu in all the time now, proper Japanese, I assume it's Kobe beef. And as a result, that's what I'm having for dinner tonight. I'm having actual Wagyu for my dinner tonight.
I got to a shout out as well. I came across a small batch rum producer. They're based in Lyme Regis, I think, produce only 250 bottles at a time. There's barely a business model in that. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's Black Ven. Anyway, this stuff was...
You can't really give it a shout-out if you don't remember what it's called.
There you go. It's Black Ven. It's come back to me now through the alcoholic haze.
Exactly. I want to alert people to a Behind the Lines episode coming in a couple of days on Tuesday. Absolutely fascinating. It's about what's going on in Mali. Again, not something we hear a lot about in the news, but Mali is essentially possibly about to fall to a sort of Islamist regime. Arthur has a conversation with a guest about the new trend for the West to withdraw from the world and not try to intervene, and especially with the situation in Afghanistan. Arguably Syria, although actually the situation is better in Syria under this particular regime than it was before, it's very, very relevant considering the sort of hysteria and apprehension about Islamists in the West. It seems a really strange thing to have absented ourselves to this extent in what's going on in the rest of the world, as if this stuff is not going to somehow get back to our shores. I thought it was a really, really interesting conversation. I would recommend that people look out for it on Tuesday. I know some of you will never want to hear the word budget again, especially pre-Christmas, but we did promise we would do a follow-up that looked at the slightly more settled reaction of both markets and punters to Wednesday, including a little top-up from the former head of the Government Economic Service, Vicky Pryce, who we had on Thursday. So I've had a follow-up chat with her on Saturday, so we will do that. And also to give Kenny a chance to voice his views, because he wasn't around for the Thursday episode, and I'm sure he has thoughts.
There was something else that grabbed my attention, though, and that's the fact that the good ship, your party, is having its inaugural conference in Liverpool this weekend.
Of course.
Yeah, it's kind of gone quiet, but it's happening in Liverpool. And so I've had a little look to keep an eye on things for listeners, really.
And because it's been a bit of a stormy week, we'll be dropping anchor in the Bay of Wokidoki and journeying via the Gulf of Grin and Share It, not once, but twice for your pleasure, as promised.
And if all this seafaring wordplay is leaving you queasy, just pop over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and sign up to support us for as little as £5 a month, and you can then start your own mutiny on our subscriber Discord channel.
Shiver me timbers, hoist the mainsail. And I'm going to need a Dramamine and full steam ahead.
Quiet Riot.
If showing the assembled media the red box has become an inevitable pre-budget ritual, then vox pops in a market or a pub has become the post-budget ritual. And those vox pops spoke volumes this year about what I am not entirely sure, either the state of the economy or the state of our politics, or both. Following what was, at least in my view, not exactly an extreme, radical or polarizing budget, the views of Barry by the snooker table and Ange by the fruit stall were pretty radically extreme and polarized. The majority of them condemned Reeves' treacherous tax raid, and if any of them were unsure it was a treacherous tax raid, they were helpfully told so by the journalist collecting the vox pops. A Sky News ninny went round with an app on her phone that helpfully calculated everything for punters and would ask such insightfully open and non-leading questions as, so this says you will be paying £600 more in tax by 2031. What do you think about that? The thing is, most of the vox pops also involved many people really liking individual measures, like more money for the NHS, or the freezing of prescription charges and rail fares, or money off the heating bill and the abolition of the two-child cap. And occasionally, they were the same people who disliked the tax measures. We like the spending, we just want someone else to pay for it, may become the epitaph for the UK economy. Armed with a few more days' worth of market reaction and the assessment of the budget by the relevant think tanks, I returned to Vicky Pryce for an update.
Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm good. So usually there is quite a lot of fallout to discuss, but I guess as a function of almost everything about the budget being known before the budget, it's been relatively predictable in a few days since the budget, hasn't it?
Well, what we've seen is that the bond markets have sort of decided to take it in their stride. There is a lot of look now, though, in some of the details, apart from the fact, of course, that the OBR accidentally let everyone see the budget beforehand. There is also the question mark as to whether Rachel Reeves already knew that there wasn't really a serious gap in finances, and yet she led everyone to think that there was. So they are nevertheless digesting what it's all about and giving, for the moment, the government the benefit of the doubt. But one of the interesting things, though, that they will be looking at, and your question about, have we sort of got into a period of stability in that respect, is that quite a lot of the headroom, which is going to be financed by increasing taxes, that Rachel Reeves is now putting aside, which is going to be double what was originally assumed. So it's going to be about 21 billion that she's setting aside for a rainy day by the end of the forecast period, is depending crucially on two things. First of all, that some of the tax increases that she's put in the budget actually happen, and they all happen quite late in the period of forecast that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And also one of them, which is the salary sacrifice one, that's restricted to just £2,000. And if that indeed goes through, that gives them quite a lot of revenue of something like 4.6 or 4.7 billion, or at least less cost to the exchequer. All that happens in 2029. That's the year of the election. So it may just never happen. And some of the other things, like a mansion tax, which is in 2028, at least all sorts of things that may be difficult electorally to do as we are approaching a period of campaigning.
It's interesting you should say that, because in the last episode, after you had to go and we were discussing the politics of the budget, I said that if I were to look at the various tables in the OBR report that show, the pluses and minuses by year, and I knew nothing else about anything else about this country or its government, I would guess that the government is planning on a 2028 election.
It's interesting. That's a very good point. That is before some of the tax increases take effect. But of course, it
Yeah.
depends what you're going to have in the manifesto. Are you going to have those tax increases in your manifesto? Or will you be in a position where you have already collected so
But
much?
there is a front loading of the investment and a back loading of the pain in a very particular way that, like I said, I don't know if it will happen or not, or if it's a cock up rather than conspiracy. But if I were just to look at those tables, I would think, 2028 seems the key sweet spot.
This is very interesting you're saying that, because there is another element of backloading, if you like. If you look again at those tables, you'll also find that quite a lot of government efficiency savings, if you want to call them that.
Yeah, cuts, yeah.
I would call them efficiency savings because, of course, we will have had another spending review by then in 2027.
Mm-hmm.
And already it's assumed that there will be quite a lot of savings or cuts that happen in the later part of the budget period that we're looking at now. So a lot will be expected of departments by then, and that isn't going to be good for public service provision. So you're absolutely right. If you were to do something more drastic in a number of areas, then 2028, before those drastic things have to happen, wouldn't be a bad time to do it, to go for an election. And you're absolutely right there, that we may well end up there. However, much will depend on the opinion polls, and if they don't look particularly good, then the general, apart from Rishi Sunak, of course, the general reaction, instinctive reaction, if you want to call it that, of politicians is let's hang on for a little bit longer because things might improve.
Something might happen.
Yes.
Yeah, something
Yes.
something
The
might
Deus
happen.
ex machina might
no,
descend
that's
on
true.
us, yes.
Yeah. There's one last thing I wanted to discuss with you, because we spent quite a lot of time on Thursday talking about, I guess, the slight immaturity that is built into British politics at the moment when it comes to budgets, the reluctance to pull the big levers that are actually honest and reliable, a lot more than all those fringe details. I've been struck a little bit by the fact that the vox pops, the public reaction to the budget, broadly seems to divide into people who think Labour are taxing too much and people who think Labour are spending too little. Often the same people think both things. And we see that really exemplified in the reaction to this notion of a mansion tax, where the right-wing press and the right-wing media environment has sought to deploy what I call the poor widow fallacy, to say these are people who are not cash rich and yet you're uprooting them from the neighborhood they know and the friends in their network and forcing them to downsize. What do you think of that?
Well, the interesting thing is that politically, of course, it made a lot of sense for her to announce this mansion tax, inverted commas. But of course, that doesn't mean there's been a real reform in terms of what people are paying. So there is nothing to say there's going to be a redistribution of the money that's collected to reduce what council tax people pay in other parts of the country. Nevertheless, the politicians of the north and elsewhere have taken that quite well because they think that this is going to go down well with their constituents, even though no redistribution, which is an interesting one itself. But it looks very much indeed as a sort of political decision. She didn't need the money, and the money that is going to be raised is very small. Net, the calculation is that it could be less than 400 million a year, and that's just not worth all the trouble. And we're already seeing that a number of estate agents and others are reporting that, in fact, people are now valuing their houses slightly lower. In one case, someone's reduced it by £1 below the 5 million mark. But it is politics, I'm afraid. And you do wonder which bit of the Labour Party she wanted to appease, and it's quite clear now. But it's interesting that overall, despite the mansion tax, which pleases bits of the population who don't live in slightly more expensive houses, the reaction to the budget hasn't been particularly good. And I understand there is a poll which the Observer has commissioned, which should be coming out now, which is suggesting that only 11% of the population, or those anyway who've been polled, think that the budget has been good or will be good for them. So that's actually pretty bad if it is only 11%.
Is there a sort of structural problem, do you think? Because like with planning law, the rights of the people who are already ensconced in property are valued above those of people who would like to have a home. And so we're having this whole discussion about poor widows having to pay this tax when, in truth, what the measure might be trying to do is encourage people to downsize, because we have a growing generation of people who don't know what a regular neighborhood and those local connections are, and have to move every year because they're renting, basically. Because, I've lived in 2 or 3 other European countries, and you do see renters' rights being a lot firmer, I think. The norm in Greece, as you know, is that people rent a property for decades sometimes, and it's the same in France. So is there a calculation there for an increasing generation of people now, even in their 40s, who cannot put down roots because basically wealth is entrenched in the generations above them?
It's interesting you're saying this, because there's been a whole debate as to whether we are too kind to pensioners, older people with assets, rather than the young who are looking for places to go. And you're absolutely right that home ownership here is considered to be the ultimate goal. And that home ownership is now not so easily accessible for people. The age at which you acquire a home has now gone up because of the costs involved. The real problem is going to be that the older who have those houses are probably not going to move at all now, because the housing market is going to be affected in anticipation of what the impact of all this is going to be. And we're already seeing some signs of that. So if you talk to any personal advisor, they probably would tell you, and I've seen that in the papers today, the people in more expensive homes just will stay put, because, of course, moving is very expensive. Stamp duty, which was supposed to come down or even be eliminated, which is what loads of economists have suggested, is still there. And what is more, actually, the interesting thing about what you said about the sort of poor widows, so people who are income poor but asset rich, it looks like the way that this tax will work, the mansion tax will work, if it is indeed finally applied, is that if you can't afford it, you don't have to pay it. It gets delayed until you either move or you die. So then it's your dependents who take that problem on. So there's going to be loads and loads of perverse implications of all this and reactions. And there's always unintended consequences, which basically mean that perhaps much less is going to be collected than even the figures that I was talking about before.
Yeah. So we're back to that other conversation about being poor at modeling second-order effects and behavioral changes, and thinking, if I do X, I should collect Y. And it never quite works that way. Vicky, thank you very much for this little top up. It's been an interesting week, I think. I know what you're saying about the polling, asking people whether they think the budget is good for them, but I think that's a different question to, given the situation, do they think Reeves has done well, if that makes sense? Those are two different situations. I think no one expected to do particularly well out of this budget.
But I agree. But the average person, of course, because of the increased tax that they have to pay, because of the freezing of the allowances, the fact that there's so much more being collected. And there are indeed calculations. I think the Resolution Foundation has said that anyone earning below 35,000 would have been better off with an increase in income tax that had been suggested earlier.
What do you think of the IFS's response?
Well, the IFS, it's interesting because, of course, it's looking at particularly what it will all mean for growth. And one of the things that they are worried about is links to what we've just been discussing, which is that real personal disposable incomes are going to be rising very slowly. And that links to all the stuff that we just said about people's reactions to the budget. But they're also, they were quite shocked, because I listened to the presentation straight after the budget. The picture didn't look anything like as bad as had been anticipated before. And quite a lot of those changes in taxes that are taking place are a bit surprising, and whether there will be any serious revival, if you like, of the economy to make sure that some of those final figures of how much tax may be collected and what the actual headroom might be will materialize. So loads and loads of question marks.
Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Quiet Riot. If we knew more about our sleep, what would we do differently? Would we go to bed at a consistent time, or take steps to reduce interruptions to our sleep? With the all-new Sleep Score, Apple Watch measures your bedtime consistency, interruptions, and sleep duration. Then, every morning it combines these factors into an easy-to-understand score from 1 to 100. So you'll know how to take the quality of your sleep from good to excellent. Introducing the new Sleep Score on Apple Watch. iPhone 11 or later required.
Kenny, The Times had a sort of our contributors' verdict on the budget piece with 4 different views, each of which was apoplectic with different aspects of the budget, many of which were contradictory. Like, if you were to adopt the things expert 1 and 3 wanted, then 2 and 4 would be even more annoyed. So add that to the vox pop situation that I was describing. Is Britain becoming economically ungovernable?
I don't think any more than it's always been.
Do you think so, though?
I don't know. Any vox pop, let's just look at the vox pops in isolation, first of all, because anytime you set a reporter out to do vox pop, to do an interview with 6 members of the public, there was a very high chance that you were going to come back with 6 people in absolute lockstep, which is incredibly dull, or you're going to get 6 crazies, which is great because that's what you want. You're not putting a vox pop in there to reflect the views of the public. You're putting a vox pop in there to get some crazy ass box quotes that you can decorate your pages with and your websites with these days. So there's that element of entertainment versus, education. And there's always a tension with these sort of things between the entertainment side and the education side as well.
But also they're self-selecting, right? Someone without strong views will not particularly want to talk to a journalist about the budget.
Yeah.
It's only the people who already hold a strong view about the budget that will stop and say, yeah, I'll go on camera and give my tuppence worth. And also the time of day. I mean, not to stereotype everyone, but if you go to a pool hall in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday, you are unlikely to find there a collection of architects and doctors. Is that a terrible thing to say?
The other thing about this is even if you did go and seek out the architects and the doctors, there's a much greater chance that you would get relatively dull and colourless quotes from them, albeit very considered and perhaps expert as well. And when you passed them under the nose of your news editor was quite likely to say, well, those were a bit dull. Let's go with the pool hall quotes instead. At least people will read those and comment on them and they'll provoke a reaction as well. So again, it's that tension between entertainment and education.
And there's something about things in isolation as well. Vicky, when I spoke to her earlier, mentioned a particular bit of polling that showed, there were 2 polls actually, and they showed like between only 11 and 16% of people, I think, thought their situation would improve significantly as a result of the budget. But I did go and look at the pre-budget opinion polling that the same companies did, and that number was only 2% before the budget. So in isolation, it might look terrible, but actually it's a significant boost. Not that this says a lot. It's exactly as Vicky said to me during the midweek episode when I said, well, considering the atmospherics, I thought it was a decent budget. And Vicky said to me, that's because you had very low expectations. And that's true.
That's such a good lesson for all of our listeners about the danger of taking bits of information and statistics in particular in isolation. I mean, we bang on quite a lot about the importance of watching for trends rather than looking for little spikes in statistics. And the only way you can find trends is by going back and seeing what the baseline is and what the baseline before that was as well. And right there, you've turned a story about, blimey, almost all the country thinks that the budget was a disaster for them to, hang on a second, 8 times more people are...
All of the country definitely thought it was going to be a disaster, and now some are less sure. There's been a big hoo-ha from the Conservatives about Reeves allegedly misleading the public by exaggerating the poor state of public finances. Is there any truth to it, Kenny? What have you found?
I sighed so much when I saw that story starting to build momentum because in so many ways it's such an on story. She's done backflip after backflip in trying to get to the budget that she delivered. And we know that there's plenty of machinations behind the scenes. The comms behind a budget are these days very, very tricky indeed. Once upon a time, you just didn't release any information, and that was your comms. And I suppose since the Osborne budget was leaked back in 2013, the comms have become much more tricky. But the whole thing is just part of a bigger picture around how a big slab of the media in this country, was going to treat this budget no matter what she did. You know, she could have stuck a penny in income tax and done whatever with benefits, and the feel of the headlines would still have been very much the same. I mean, this morning, I got to see that the Daily Mail was banging on about Reeves's lies. You know, she's got to go because she's a liar. This is the newspaper that I used to work for that still pays Boris Johnson 7 figures to spout his stuff. We know what the game is here, and it's probably a good idea for our sanity not to take it too seriously. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't pose challenges and dangers and threats and all these other things.
2 things struck me. The first is that the OBR has come out and sort of confirmed that they let her know ahead of time. And my first thought was, after what happened on Wednesday, the OBR, I think, has earned a period of silence.
Yes, I know.
Do you know what I mean? Don't come
Absolutely.
out now and do press. It wasn't a big deal, as it were, but it could have been a big deal.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
there was a rabbit coming out of the hat, something that people didn't know, and markets got hold of it, this could have been a very big deal. So the OBR needs to really concentrate on putting its own house in order.
Very much
and
so.
then the second thing I would say is that everyone is pointing to the fact that the forecast came in better than expected, but Reeves still increased taxes. But the point is that before that forecast, there was very much trailing that income tax was going to go up, as well as many of these changes, I'm sure. And in the end, income tax didn't go up. So maybe that was the effect of the forecast coming in better than expected, that they thought, okay, so we don't have to break that manifesto pledge and raise income tax, which I'm sure the same papers will be pointing to furiously now if it had happened. It makes zero sense to me in terms of the Conservative Party's attack on the budget, which was that she hasn't been ruthless enough in cutting. Then you come out 2 days later and you say, well, actually, the economy is doing much better than she let on. You can't be demanding that, given this new picture, Rachel Reeves has to revise the way she's taxing, but also insist on 47 billion or whatever it is they're proposing on welfare cuts. You have to revise the other side of the ledger if you think that's the case. And of course, they're not.
There's the political element as well as the figures, as well as the ledger sheet element. And at first reading, when the OBR report dropped before the budget, at first reading, it looked like there was going to be kind of a front loading of the good stuff, and then the pain was going to come in as we got closer to the next election cycle, which made no political sense whatsoever. At the same time, you've got local council elections coming up in May, so there's an immediate need for some sort of political boost as well. Reeves and Starmer, because they're in this together, have to have one eye on finding some sort of way of building a war chest so that when they get into the next part of the election cycle proper, they've got a little bit of wriggle room over and above what you need just to cope with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. You need to have some money in the back pocket. And I think it's quite smart, really, even if the delivery and the messaging around it has been chaotic. If they are able to find a way of squirreling something away for those rainy days which are coming, then from me, they get a small tick for that. That's almost Gordon Brown-like behaviour, isn't it?
I know you haven't had a chance to listen to Thursday's episode, my cheeky prediction, and I was discussing this with Vicky as well when we spoke earlier, that if I were an alien come to Earth that knew nothing about the UK, its electoral cycle, the parties involved or anything like that, and I just looked at those OBR tables, I would make a fairly confident prediction of a 2028 election. Now, I don't know whether that will happen or not, because obviously it will depend on how opinion polling is looking. But looking at the distribution of sugar and spice, as it were, in that budget, it seems to me that there is the preliminary prep for a slightly earlier surprise election.
Quiet Riot. I use Shipt same-day delivery to stay connected with my sister during the holidays. She lives across the country. Shipt has tons of stores to order from. Groceries from Albertsons, crafts from Michael's, even pet supplies from PetSmart. The list goes on. So when we have long-distance movie nights, I turn to Shipt to get face masks, snacks, and everything else we need delivered to her and to me same day. Download the app or visit shipt.com. That's SHIPT.com.
Quiet Riot.
What I wanted to ask you about was a very specific thing, because one of the themes of the Vox Pops was about this so-called mansion tax. We get what I call the poor widow fallacy, where you find basically the most egregious example of a little old lady that lives in a big house but actually is completely cash poor in her late 90s and slightly confused, and you go, how can they be so cruel and make this person move at this stage? But any wealth redistribution will be by necessity in part generational, Kenny.
That's right.
Because it is that generation that holds a lot more of the wealth. This is not a point of division or a sort of generational warfare. It's just a straight up fact in terms of how house prices have moved with relation to salaries, in terms of savings, in terms of free education, in terms of right to buy, all of that stuff, in terms of Brexit even. The generation, let's say 40 or 50 and over, there is a discrepancy there. So how do we resolve that if every time any government attempts the slightest bit of rebalancing, we just get wall-to-wall coverage of the most pitiful pensioner making very legitimate points about their own plight, but societally that inequality persists?
It does. There are two issues here, I think. First of all, you're always going to be able to find those sort of examples. I mean, this week, you mentioned the poor widow fallacy. I can't remember which newspaper it was in I read, but they found somebody in Kensington with an 8-bedroom house who was worried about how she was going to afford the new taxes. And I thought, yeah, I bet you've had her lined up for a long time. She wasn't plucked out of the air.
I mean, sell the houses, the short answer, as cruel as that sounds.
Well, if you're in your 80s and you're going to be struggling with paying several £1,000s a year, then make the law so that that bill is payable out of duties after death.
I think they are. I think that's the plan, by the way.
There we go. So problem solved. She doesn't have to leave her house. She gets to pass on less of the wealth that's locked in that property onto the next generation. But it's not actually a problem as such. It's not something that anybody would wish on themselves, of course. But we're not throwing somebody out onto the street. But I think the second point that I'd like to make is what a wonderful, wonderful distraction this sort of stuff is when it comes to redistributing wealth. Because the real issue when it comes to wealth redistribution is how the billionaires and the top 0.1% continue to gather more and more and more of the wealth that's going around. And the trickle down has become a trickle up. And yet we have this intense fear because we get told capital will flee the country and it will be the end of times. You cannot go after these people. They'll just locate somewhere else. That's where the issue is. It's not really that there are some older people living in big houses in the southeast of this country. The issue is really that there are people with billions upon billions upon billions, and they don't shoulder their share of the burden. The housing crisis in this country is caused quite simply by a lack of supply, and the lack of supply is caused by various other things. It's a far more complicated situation than we've got time to discuss today. But it's not the fact that there are people staying in 8-bedroom houses that's the issue here. It's a lack of quality, affordable properties at scale in reasonable locations. So, it's a very, very handy distraction.
I don't agree, but like you said, we don't have time to discuss it. I think this country has a culture of storing wealth into property. Property, because of its constant increase in value, which depends on low supply, by the way, has become basically a pension plan. And that's one of the causes for the housing crisis. The other cause for the housing crisis is that less than 1% of people in this country own roughly 40% of the land in this country.
Well, that goes back to 1066.
Feudal. Yeah, it's still feudal. It hasn't been redistributed.
We have 1,000 years of inequality baked into the system. That's absolutely right.
Now, listeners, we are very grateful to Vicky Pryce for her contribution, and she does have a new book out that is actually precisely on this topic. It's called Mismanaged Decline, What Politicians Won't Tell You About the Economy. And we have added it to our bookshop.org. And for the next few days, shipping is free. So we will drop a link right at the top of the show notes where to go and buy a copy.
Quiet Riot.
Now, we promised you some relaxing treats after your budget homework, so let's fire up them banjos for our first weekend Wokey Dokey.
Wokey dokey.
Kenny, what fash-baiting brilliance have you got for us today?
I hadn't seen this story, so thank you to Judge Darkness on Blue Sky, my favourite handle of this week, for flagging this particular story to us. Now, about 4 weeks ago, there was a series of leaked recordings from a whole bunch of private lectures in San Francisco, and they included comments from tech zillionaire Peter Thiel, who, amongst other things, is the most important patron of Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, Thiel delivered a series of private lectures titled, get this, The Antichrist, a 4-part lecture series. Modest in its ambitions, I'd suggest. The Antichrist, a 4-part lecture series.
Was it autobiographical?
Do you know? Oh, my Lord. Well, he argued that regulators and critics of technological innovation, including names such as Greta Thunberg, could be, and I quote, legionnaires of the Antichrist.
Okay.
You sort of read this and you shake your head and go, all right, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And he doesn't just flirt with the apocalyptic. He goes all in. He's openly discussing the Antichrist. He names Pope Leo XIV as a potential manifestation of that figure. And, you know, possibly most disturbingly, and I say possibly because there's a lot that's disturbing about this, he advises J.D. Vance to ignore the Pope on moral matters altogether. I mean, let that sink in. The main backer of the likely Republican nominee for president is accusing the Bishop of Rome of being an agent of the end of times. And yet the story barely made a dent.
I mean, J.D. Vance killed the last one, so maybe ignoring this one is an upgrade.
There's a pattern developing, isn't there? Calling Dan Brown. Now, I come from Scotland, which, let's be honest about it, it's a place where people of a particular religious persuasion may well occasionally describe the Pope in what I would say are deeply unflattering terms. But we're talking Peter Thiel here, who thinks that not only is the Pope woke, but by inference, being woke equals the apocalypse. So, this week, the apocalypse is woke. Stick that in your end of times pipe and smoke it.
I don't know how we can follow this.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me.
Okay, now we've dealt with the end of times. Alex, have you any joy just to lift the mood a tinsy little bit?
So this is from listener Martin Brunt. And he's the actual subject of Grin and Share It. It's the first time a listener is involved, not only as having suggested something, but as part of the Grin and Share It. So Martin has a dog called Bertie, and his dog has just won a BBC Making a Difference award this year because Martin has trained his dog to pick up litter. So instead of playing fetch with a stick, the dog has been trained to shoot out and bring up plastic bottles, which are then put in the recycling bins in whatever park or forest he's in. And he's picked up, in the last couple of years that he's been doing this, he's picked up more than 10,000 bottles.
What?
Which are all now in recycling. Obviously, it doesn't make up for the end of times. And obviously, it does mean that Bertie is an agent of the Antichrist. But I think good boy Bertie and good boy Martin, this is a truly, truly wonderful Grin and Share It.
Quiet Riot.
Now, dust off your People's Front of Judea jokes, because this weekend sees the inaugural conference of the Corbyn Sultana Your Party project in Liverpool. Except, by the time you listen to this, it may well not be the Your Party project, because one of the big bits of business is deciding on an actual name for this somewhat troubled child of the political left. Lest we be accused of failing to take this organisation seriously, let's first say that it's quite an achievement to go from announcing a new political party to holding your first conference in just 5 months. And let's also say that trying to be a broad church that welcomes allies from across the spectrum of left-leaning politics in a spirit of unity is a gargantuan undertaking in itself. This is not a challenge for the faint of heart. Now, with all that said, plenty of political geeks have had their popcorn ready for this weekend's anticipated shenanigans. Well, have they been disappointed, or have they had to order extra popcorn supplies online?
We have an amazing opportunity before us. Look at this hall, absolutely full. Look at the people around the country that want this party to succeed. Look at the hopes that so many people have. People suffering poverty, children growing up in overcrowded homes, people sleeping on the street, people bearing the brunt of racist attacks across the country, people fearful for the future. They want us to succeed, and it's up to us to develop a mass party and a force that does bring people in and give people that sense of hope. That is why we're here, and that's what we're determined to do.
Kenny, how about a sort of summary of how we got here?
Oh.
The story so far, as it were.
That's good, because it's only a 5-month story, really. It doesn't take that long. They launched in July 2025, right at the beginning. There was actually...
Previously in Your Party.
So at the beginning of July 2025, email went out. The temporary name Your Party was announced to the world. And the idea was to build a grassroots, member-driven left-wing party with policies around wealth redistribution, public ownership, and progressive foreign policy. Official registration happened on the 30th of September this month, with the party still lacking a final name and indeed permanent leadership. The calm before the chaos vibe, if indeed there ever was one, really didn't last long. There were internal disputes that erupted over the party's direction, its structure, and finances almost immediately. In particular, there was a damning row over a premature membership drive, which was launched by Sultana without wider agreement. 2 of the party's MPs resigned, signalling pretty serious internal fracture. And on top of that, there's real ideological tension amongst members who, genuinely give a damn about particular issues. There's a row over trans rights, which underscored a much deeper struggle over whether socially conservative voters even have a place in the party. Now, originally, there were plans for 13,000 people to attend the Your Party conference. If you remember at the time, there were something like 600,000 people signed up by email. The plans for 13,000 people haven't really come to fruition. At the last count, there were about 2,500 people there. That figure may have gone up for Corbyn's speech on Saturday morning. But the ACC in Liverpool, which is where the conference is being held, is a really big old place. Labour have held conferences there, and it looked a little bit empty. So that is how we got to where we are this weekend. And those of us who tried to be nice about the challenges facing this fledgling political party, well, we had to re-record bits of our show. Now, this lot still have to decide what to call their party, how to elect a leader, what policies to prioritise, what to do with the money Sultana raised a few months ago, and whether the 2 unity-focused individuals at the head of the party will bury the hatchet, or indeed whether we're about to see the People's Front for Judea go full scorched earth on the Judea People's Front. Still, if you ordered popcorn in for this conference, you were very well rewarded. All right, your party, their party, our party, everyone's party, nobody's party. Do we actually know what the short list of names that they're going to agree upon or fail to agree upon is?
Inadvertently, you have just began the list of names for the party, because the first 2 from the 4 being proposed are Your Party and Our Party. The other 2, which I suspect are less confusing, are Popular Alliance and For the Many.
Right.
That's the short list of 4 names from which delegates, but people online also will be able to vote. So by the end of this weekend, we will have a name.
What would you vote for?
Oh, I think Popular Alliance, maybe?
It's not easy, is it? If you sat down and said, I'm going to name a new political party, actually, it ain't half difficult trying to explain what you stand for, or indeed just having a label that isn't going to be mocked. It's pretty blooming tricky.
I mean, I quite like your party and our party. I just think it has the potential to be very confusing when it's being reported on.
It's funny. I mean, that's absolutely right. If you try and search for it, it's a bit of a nightmare. But we've kind of all adopted it, haven't we? When we say your party, we all know that it's the Corbyn Sultana project now, don't we? So they've kind of got 5 months of recognition already in the bank.
Yes, but of course the problem with that is that you say the Corbyn Sultana project, but looking at reports from Saturday afternoon, if these things are borne out, that Sultana is now boycotting the conference and there's been a serious falling out, there may not be a Sultana Corbyn project, in which case it might actually be smarter to move away from that initial name. Or you face the truly extraordinary prospect that members vote to call it your party, and then Zara Sultana sets up our party, which has the potential to be really confusing.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Blink. Blink Friday starts now with up to 65% off Blink Smart Security. Check on your pets all season long with new Blink Mini 2K Plus cameras. See your gifts arrive in head-to-toe view with Blink Video Doorbell. Ready to use right out of the box. Just unwrap Blink and go. From pet parents to jet setters to busy families, Blink Friday deals have your holidays covered. Shop now at Amazon.com/Blink.
Quiet Riot. Have we seen any policies emerge, any takeaways, or is this simply a structural thing to say this is how we're going to set it up, this is how it's going to be funded, and this is how it will decide policy?
Well, I mean, look, it's important to say that the conference is ongoing as we're recording this, so it may well be that some big announcements are made between us sitting in front of the mic and you listening to this whenever you're listening to it. But there was definitely a two-channel approach, if you like, because things kicked off on the eve of conference on Friday with Corbyn having an event somewhere in Liverpool and Sultana having her own event somewhere else in Liverpool. Both of them presumably, calling for unity from different rooms in different buildings in Liverpool. There were no standout surprises from the Corbyn side of things. And in fact, when he gave his speech Saturday morning, there were predictable calls for unity within the party. And then it was, from Corbyn's perspective, it was really all familiar ground, at least the bits of the speech that I heard. He was railing against wealth inequality. We've been doing that ourselves here today. He was railing against homelessness, likewise. He had to go at the privatisation of utilities. And he, not surprisingly, dedicated part of the speech to the plight of Palestinian people and led an inevitable chant, I suppose, of free Palestine in the hall. Sultana, on Friday, there was one headline that leapt out at me from her speech where she said, and I've got it here, we need a wealth tax, but we also need to nationalise the entire economy. Now, she talks about utilities, she talks about transport, she talks about energy being important. We all acknowledge the fact that each of these individual parts of the economy are far from perfect. But then she says you've got to look beyond that. You've got to look at the banks, you've got to look at construction, you've got to look at the entire economy. We have to remember who she was talking to. This was a message that was aimed very much at a hardcore political group of people from various shades of leftism. But if you took the idea that the economy is in a bad place and the super rich are not shouldering their share of the problems, as we said earlier in this show, I don't think you'd get many people, certainly amongst our listeners, who'd say, I disagree with you. But saying we're going to nationalise the entire economy.
I guess what Sultana is articulating in a relatively crude way, I would suggest, is the difference between social democracy and democratic socialism.
Yeah.
Social democracy is about managing the capitalist economic model with fairness in mind and long-term sustainability. And democratic socialism is bringing about socialism, via democratic means rather than via revolution or violent takeover, which is at the communist end of things. And so I guess what she's articulating is not, it's not outrageous. It's a venerable school of thought. Whether it has an audience here in the UK, I don't know. Maybe it does. Do you think the person looking on at this most nervously, in a way, will be Zach Polanski?
No, I don't. I mean, Zach Polanski at this stage I think he's doing a very good job of cementing that leap in popularity that the Greens have had under his leadership very, very well. Whereas
Let me put it another way. Will Zach Polanski want this project to succeed or to fizzle away? You deal, in some ways, when you do your PR work, you deal with marketing and product placement and things like that. And actually, this is an age-old question. Do you want more of a market for leftist politics to develop in this country? And actually, that benefits everyone in that space. Or do you want to monopolize that space?
Well, there's a parallel in the business world to this. If you walk down a high street and you see a McDonald's, there's a good chance that you'll see a Burger King nearby as well. If you walk down a high street and you see a Costa, you'll probably see a Starbucks very nearby as well. Even though intuitively it makes no sense to set up shop next door to your literal competitor. Actually, what happens is you create more of a demand because people come to that part of the high street because they know there are 2 or 3 places they can get a coffee, 2 or 3 places they can get a burger and fries if that's what they want. There is a perfectly valid argument that, okay, terms and conditions apply, but by creating more interest in left of centre politics, you benefit everybody. It's not a zero-sum game. And I think there definitely is interest in it. There's merit in that. Apart from anything else, what you do is you increase the profile of left of centre politics in a media environment, which is not great at left of centre politics. So intellectually, I think there is a perfectly valid argument to be made that the Corbyn-Sultana project doing well could actually indirectly benefit the Greens and Zach Polanski as well. In reality, I don't know. And I don't think at this stage it's something that is going to be losing the Green Party any sleep. Your party have got a lot of work to do to demonstrate that they're capable of handling the basics of running a party, to the point of knowing what to do with the money that was raised by Sultana earlier this year. Some really very, very simple questions have to be answered. They have to decide on their leadership structure. And then they're going to throw it open to members to decide what the core policies are. So in other words, what we have here is a party that deliberately shows no leadership. It's all about you guys will come to us with what you think the important issues are, and we will then act accordingly. And that is a world of pain. One of the big controversies this weekend has been the fact that if you're a member of your party, you're banned from holding membership of other socialist parties. And there have already been people on stage saying this is wrong and shouting, and anybody opposing this is getting a round of applause. So the internal divisions are already plain to see.
Yes, there have been, of course there's been some problems, of course there's been some stresses and strains.
Zara Sultana obviously is another big voice in this movement.
She's here. Yeah.
Are you two friends?
We're colleagues in Parliament, and we obviously communicate. So we'll see each other tomorrow morning in the conference. And she'll be speaking there.
Have you both been involved in the sort of organising of this?
More me than her.
Now, the Saturday afternoon stuff, reportedly Zara Sultana boycotting the inaugural Your Party conference, just utterly ludicrous, considering it's her party. I mean, she's the co-creator of it with Corbyn. And it does appear to be pretty terminal for that project, at least as a joint project. It might go on as a Corbyn-only project. And the reason that's incredibly annoying is, of course, that it gives comedy ammunition to all the wrong people on the right wing who will bash the left over the head with this. On the other hand, you could say that now is the healthy stage to get these battles fought and settled, rather than just assemble a ragtag band under a banner like Farage did. Because Reform UK just lost its council leader in Doncaster this weekend. He resigned over a policy disagreement on whether to reopen Sheffield Airport, accusing other party members, and I quote, of vitriolic behaviour bordering on abuse.
Right.
So that's now the sixth major local authority under their control falling apart. there are real people living there and suffering because of what's going on.
Absolutely.
So, yes, sure, speaking with a united voice is difficult, especially for the left, but maybe your party is doing it the right way around. These may be teething troubles and growing pains, or the project might be dead in the water. But better to find out now than when they are in charge of major councils up and down the country.
Quiet Riot.
Okay, as promised, here's your second helping of Wokie Dokie happiness. Think of it as Quiet Riot's Black Friday sale, a sort of 2-for-1 that you didn't ask for, didn't know you needed, and didn't get the chance to put back on the shelf.
Wokie dokie.
For our bog-off Wokie Dokie then, I'm not sure I can compete thematically with the Antichrist and the Apocalypse being woke. But in terms of pure headlines, I reckon I've got you beat, Kenny. So from the Telegraph comes this, I quote, "Wool of gay sheep."
You've got me already. You had me at gay sheep, said the Scottish guy.
"Wool of gay sheep passes woke test for New York fashion debut."
Oh, come on, man. What have you got? What is... This is literally wool from literally homosexualized sheep.
Do you need any more than that?
Oh, I need it all.
Okay, so, all right, in fairness to the Telegraph, I will say this is genuinely the most woke thing that's ever happened. So fair dues. Designer Michael Schmidt has a show in New York Fashion Week entitled I Will Survive.
Hey.
And it uses fleece from rams that prefer same-sex partners. I've had a look at the clothes. They're quite nice. I think you have to be quite young and thin to wear them. They all seem to crop basically round about just underneath the crotch. There's a lot of mini action going on. A pair of mini dungarees, very fetching.
Do
There's
they
a nice
in
woolly
any
hat.
way, and I'm choosing my words so carefully here, do they in any way reflect the heritage of the wool that's used, put them together?
All right, so let me do the fun side first.
Okay.
Michael Schmidt is doing this to raise awareness of the fact that homosexuality does exist in nature. A lot of people think of it as purely a human trait, but it isn't actually. We have many, many examples in nature.
Yeah.
That's the reason he's doing it for. But I will say this, there is a core to the story that I didn't know about, and that actually makes it a bit of a grin and share it, in my view. Because I didn't know that working farms, they slaughter rams that refuse to mate.
Right.
So apparently this happens quite a lot. There are rams that are just not that interested in mating with female counterparts and quite like the company of other rams, let's say, and they get slaughtered. And so he has collaborated with a charity, a German non-profit that rescues those non-mating sheep and is making a little bit of a commercial endeavor for that will fund that non-profit that rescues non-mating sheep. And I think that's actually rather lovely. And he's doing so in collaboration with Grindr.
Of course he is.
So this is genuinely the wokest thing that's ever happened and deserves the title Wokie Dokie, I think, fully. That's my contribution. As I said, not as broad a theme as the end of time, but really rather delicious. So it's time now for our second helping of Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me.
We've got another one that was sent in from one of our fans on Blue Sky. Joe, or Inky Cat, thank you. So when the Elizabeth line was being built under London, obviously there was vast tunnels and tens of thousands of tons of soil had to be shifted out of the capital. But of course, commuters think nothing of it.
Of course, that's a lot of earth, isn't it?
It's like the biggest moles on the planet, creating what would be the biggest molehills on the planet. They had to get that stuff out of London and put it somewhere. They could have done any number of things with it. Well, I don't know if all of the soil, but certainly a huge amount of it was shipped off to Wallasey Island in Essex, out on the east coast.
Any particular reason or just spite?
dump it on Clacton. And so the excavated soil landed in Essex, and it was enough for them to reshape the land and lay the groundwork for something rather unexpected. Working with the RSPB, that's the folk with the binoculars and the good intentions about birds, the land was remodelled. There was new sea defences built, they carved marshes out of it, mudflats were created, lagoons, salt marsh habitats were recreated, and in 2015 a seawall was reversed. For the first time in 400 years, the tide was allowed back in. Water returned, and with it came a whole bunch of life. 20 years ago, nothing of any great note stirred there. Now there's tens of thousands of different creatures call it home. And it's one of those rare cases where big infrastructure, in this case a rail line tunnel under London, collaborates with conservation and turns what was otherwise going to be waste into a haven. And as coastal habitats shrink worldwide, projects like this really do show what's possible when people choose creation over destruction. There you go. So the next time you're rumbling under London on the Elizabeth line, don't forget that because of that line, flocks of birds are tucking into a mudflat banquet out there in Essex. Ain't that nice?
Quiet Riot.
Let's turn the good ship Quiet Riot for home and tie up for a few days of shore leave. Thank you all very, very much for journeying with us again this weekend.
Please don't forget to take all your belongings as you disembark, and also don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review, back us in Ko-Fi, and visit our bookshop where you can buy Vicky Pryce's new book, Mismanaged Decline, What Politicians Won't Tell You About the Economy.
We'll be back on Thursday with another bumper show and special guest Sam Friedman, who we have grown very, very fond of. Until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend and remember to keep on rioting. Just do it quietly.
We love you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Kenny.
Did you forget though for a moment?
I did. It's difficult on a Saturday. I could
Who
see
am
the
I
words.
again?
It's like, why is that my name there?